Ladies and gentlemen, good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming to this session early in the morning. And today we are going to have a very interesting session. We have an excellent presenter today, Dr. Carrie Wilward. She was at the plenary session yesterday, plenary session 1, so most of you may know her, but I briefly introduce Dr. Carrie Wilward. She is a Chief Learning Officer of Sun Microsystems, where she leads an organization responsible for employee, customer, partner, and the Sun community learning. She has led her department to win over 20 awards for innovations in learning and development in the last 2 years. She also held the position of Vice President, Chief Talent Officer for Selectron, where she was responsible for worldwide executive development, organization development, global staffing, etc. She is actually make a very unique, creative person, and she will make our session very interesting and creative. I think she needs a lot of time, so I will, introduce Dr. Carrie Wilward, and please give a big welcome with applause.
Good morning. As you can see, we're going to have a little bit of a different session. You can see that there are some materials on your table. As a first thing that you may notice, one of the titles of this conference is Creative Education for All. So what does creative mean, and what does creative look like? There's a phrase that I love from the Malaysians called NATO. Now everybody thinks of NATO as North American Treaty Organization. Does anybody know what the other meaning of NATO is? No action, talk only. Right? So we're not going to be no action, talk only this morning. We are going to be creative. And so you're going to get to experience creative education this morning. One of the things that I have on my business card when I send an email out is it says, different isn't always better, but better is always different. So this morning, you're going to get a chance to be not only creative, but different. So you may be comfortable with this, you may not be comfortable with this. Either way, we'd like you to try a creative and different way of learning this morning. So you're sitting at breakfast, and you can see there are lots of tables. We're going to have about 10 minutes of presentation, and then you're going to be doing lots of work this morning. So you're going to be working with one another to help define what the future looks like. So just a second about Sun Learning Services. We have our learners, as we mentioned in the introduction, come from across many different organizations. We deliver over 8 million hours of training a year to over 600,000 students. We have over 850 people on our team. And as you may have heard, we are about to be acquired by Oracle. So lots of change ahead for us at Sun as well. We've won, we found out while we were here that we've won 4 more awards. So in the last 18 months, we've now won 24 awards, including #1 in the world as recognized by ASTD. I'm also the author of a book, if you may have heard me talk about that yesterday just briefly, on what is the workplace going to look like in 2020, and how are innovative companies already looking at how to attract, develop, and keep tomorrow's employees. So the basis of what we're going to talk about today includes these predictions. So we're going to think about, put yourself into the future 10 years. If you go back 10 years, you might recall that Google was still working out of a garage. The person who invented Facebook was still in high school. So we've had lots of change in the last 10 years. We can imagine that there will be much more change in the next 10 years. So let's put our heads into the future and be very creative about thinking for the future, just for breakfast. I'd like to introduce, since we're going to be doing some very active things, there are many people here in the room who are going to help facilitate this. One of the companies that's responsible for helping create this Engage map that you see in front of you and also does custom simulations is BTS. Dan Parisi is here representing BTS. And yes, thank you, Dan. And then a company that my co-author and Rick Von Felt here have founded looks at the future workplace and works with HR and other members of companies to attract, develop, and keep talent. So Rick Von Felt. Thank you, Rick. So with that, I'm going to tell you just a little bit about what we're going to do today, and then I'm going to turn it over to Rick. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what is happening in the universe. So let's be very global and broad in our thinking today. What is happening that is changing where the world is headed? And then we're going to do some exercises. Dan will take us through an exercise where we first start to think about, well, what are the implications of, what does the future look like with those changing forces? And then what are the implications of that for us as companies? Then I'm going to cover about 15 minutes worth of best practices we discovered in writing our book. And although we have over 50 best practices, we'll just cover 3 or 4 from the book. And then you're going to think at your tables, well, what actions do we think we should take in our companies? What are we already doing to address these changes in the world? And what can we do going forward? And then we'll do 4, 5, 6 predictions for the future and allow for Q&A. Now, I know many of you have a 9 o'clock session to get to, and this was scheduled to run to 9 o'clock. So we're going to try and get right up to about 5 minutes before to allow you just a moment of time to be able to get out the door. So with that, Rick, I'd like to turn it back over to you so you can run through some of the changing forces.
Super. Thank you very much, Carrie. I appreciate it. Mr. Ju, thank you very much for the introduction this morning. My name is Rick Von Felt. I am currently a partner for a company called Future Workplace. And my consulting company is thinking about where is the future of learning, where is the future of human resources, and are we prepared to be ready for what is about to hit us in the future. And before working for Future Workplace, I was a vice president of training and development at Hewlett-Packard and at Dell Computer and at Gillette. And so I've spent much of my career thinking about what's going to be in the future for companies around human resources. I want to give you some information to begin the morning for you to think about the future. And hopefully it may even scare you just a little bit when we start to think about where the future of human resources are going. Let's first of all look at 3 trends that everybody in the room needs to know about if you are going to have your company, your organization, your department ready for the future of human resources, ready for the future of learning and development. The first trend talks about globalization. By the year 2020, global access to markets will change the way in which things are happening. Today in the world, there are less and less companies being owned by the USA and more companies being owned by places like China, India, Russia, Brazil, and Korea. And so the question is, are we creating global workplaces for the people around the world, or are we still staying within our own country? Big shifts in terms of globalization. Trend number 2, by 2020, the demographics will mean that we must think about a different way in doing human resources and training and development. By the year 2020, 5 different generations will be working side by side in the workplace. Everybody from a generation who will be in their 70s, who have never picked up a computer and does not like to do text messages, all the way to the very end, in which children will have learned how to do text messaging before they understand how to read. and they will be working side by side in your companies, in your universities. And the question is, are you prepared for that? The third trend is around the area of the social web. Younger people are being connected today by many types of technologies and expect instant connection amongst each other. And this social web will require us to think differently about the tools and the processes, how we learn and what tools we use within our own companies as we understand how to use this social web to be more effective within our companies. Let's take a look at some of these very specifically. In the area of globalization, you can see that large trends are happening from 2005 until the very end of 2008 in the number of companies in the Financial Times having their home office located in different countries. For example, you'll see in the United States in 2005, 219 companies in the Financial Times top 500 have now gone down to 169. That means more and more countries outside of the US are purchasing and owning and running companies around the world. You see large trends of organizations in places such as India going from 5 to 13, Hong Kong 8 to 10, and of course changes are also happening in Korea as well. We also see that in the social web, young people today have many types of technologies that are around them all of the time. They run their lives simultaneously with new technologies to interact with each other. They have things like Facebook, computers, laptops, netbooks, types of PDAs, things that will eventually start to strap onto their wrist, to their shoulders, to their head, and that will create a new way of interacting with each other like never before. We also can see that there is a shift in demographics. Today, the leadership of most of our companies are being taken up by baby boomers that were born between 1946 and 1964. Very soon, Generation X will begin to take over that leadership. And as you can see from the chart, there is only 1/2 the amount of leaders in Generation X as there will be in the baby boomer area. And so very quickly, though, we move on to the millennials who were born in 1977. Today, they are 29 years old. In the next 10 years, they will start to take over the leadership of our companies. The question is, are we ready for them to take over? And are we doing the right type of education to make sure that they are ready? We also can see a huge shift in the aging population of many places around the world, especially here in Asia. We can take a look that back in 1930, there was a large influx of population in the lower areas. These charts, by the way, are for Japan as an example of the shifting demographics and what we really have to be ready for in the next 10 to 20 years. By the year 2000, all of the individuals that were born in the 1920s and 30s have now shifted up, and a pivotal time happened in the year 2000 in which the greatest number of workers ever at the age 50 were in the aging Japanese population. But what becomes even more frightening in Japan, in China, in Korea, in Singapore, is the shift of what happens over the next 20 years, when indeed by the year 2030, the largest population is going to be in the area of 50 to 90 years old, with over 39% of the population above 65 years old. And also, unfortunately for us men, we do not live as long as women. And there will be a larger shift in the amount of women that will be at this population age as well. So the question is, as we expand our companies and we're looking for more employees, and yet in many large countries, many of those employees are not available in the younger millennial group, what are we going to do? Are we prepared? Are we thinking about it in terms of our HR strategy, our people strategy as we move forward? What do we think about knowledge? What about culture stagnation when this happens? How about gender impact on your company and your organization? And lastly, what will happen with technology automation as we look at not having as many people to work in our companies as we did in the past? We'll also continue to see that the millennial generation, the purple area, which started out in 2005 in a large, smaller amount than the baby boomers, year by year by year, to the year 2020, when you can see that 50% of our entire workplace will be comprised of the millennial generation. Those individuals who are going to demand and require that we are connected socially, that we look at new ways of doing things than we've ever done before, and we're going to need them in order to be effective with growing organizations and companies. When you start to look at then the three trends of globalization, demographics, and the social web, and you take a look at the HR charter, which is to attract, develop, and to keep your employees, each of these major trends will require new and different changes within how we bring people into our company, what we do to develop them and train them, and even more interesting, will we be able to keep them overall? What we want to spend time this morning is looking at these trends and have you participate in an exercise with us at the table in which we start to think about what will the future look like? What happens when you have demographics, globalization, and social web impacting your companies? What do you think will happen? I want to turn now this over to Dan Parisi. Dan will take us through the instructions for the exercises in the middle of your table, and we'll together start to think about the impact of these three big trends.
Good morning, everyone. My name is... Thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Dan Parisi. I'm the Managing Director of BTS San Francisco office, and BTS is the world leader in business simulations and discovery learning. Excuse me. The map in front of you is a discovery learning tool. It's called a learning map. And that map, by the way, I'll just introduce you to what's on your table, and then I'll introduce my colleagues. On the table is a map. It's about 3 feet by 5 feet. You see it there? That's important. There is a plastic envelope there, so you should probably clear the bread baskets, the cheese, and the eggs off of the maps right now. There's a plastic envelope, and there's some handouts. There's one handout for every person. The handout looks like this. Just to orient you with what's on your table. There's also information for each of you in Korean. As soon as you clear off that table, while you're doing that, I'll introduce my colleagues in the audience who are going to be here to help us as well. And we have Alexander. Hey, Alexander, raise your hand. And then we have Hung Soo Cho, my colleague. So, thank you. So this map that is in front of you is designed to engage you, the learner, with the material. Instead of just lecturing you for the hour and a half, we're going to have you get a little bit more engaged with the content, engage with your colleagues, and have discussions around the material. And this way you bring your own creativity and your own ideas to the content. Okay? So let's jump right in. You've seen that you each have this handout in front of you. This is important during the process, so keep that next to you. And then in your table kits, in the plastic envelope, find activity card 1. Activity card 1 looks like this. Activity card 1. So you have activity card 1, and you have the fact cards, and you have your pen. Ask one person at each of your tables to read activity card 1 aloud and follow the instructions. So one person reads activity card 1 aloud, and the team follows the instructions. And the facilitators are roaming around the room to help you. Activity card 1 is also on the screen behind me, if that helps. You have about 8 minutes to finish this activity, which is answering those 3 questions. Just activity card 1. Don't look at activity card 2 or 3.
All right, we're going to go through the answers now. So, are we ready? The number of Global 500 companies based in China grew by over 400%. What percentage of Global 500 headquarters did the United States lose in that same period? How many said A? What tables? A or B? B. B. 23% reduction in 5 years. Amazing. Financial Times reported this. All right, the major East Asian countries will face a sizable reduction over the next 20 years. True or false? True. True. By 2015, millennials will make up more than half of the workforce. This is true globally, by the way. It's true in the United States and it's true globally. All right, we have a lot of males in the room and you're probably worried about this next answer. So, if you're a healthy male at 60, you can expect to, this is, by the way, reported by the World Health Organization. They have two measures. They're called HALE, Health Adjusted Life Expectancy. So, and it's what's the average male, because of course everybody in the room is extraordinary, is going to live way beyond the average male. But the average male, how long do you think they're going to work to? 70 or 75? 80. So use it out there. And women are 78. So women are 78, according to the World Health Organization. So, so congratulations to those who are 80 and to those who will be 90, who will still be in the workplace. So it is very possible that you will go to work with your great-grandchildren someday, right? Very possible. Not your children, not your grandchildren. Your great-grandchildren could be in the workplace with you. This is false. The number of people who are joining social workplaces, it's very saturated for young people. And so now what's happening is the growth is moms trying to find out what their kids are doing on social networks is one of the biggest ways in which it's growing. And parents who are trying to keep up with their children and communicate with their children. How long did it take television to penetrate 50 million households? 13 years. So the rapidity, how fast we can reach many, many households has greatly reduced over time. All right. Now, I will turn it back to Dan to do the next exercise.
Okay, so now we're going to discuss at your tables the implications of these shifts. And we're going to use activity card 2, it says activity card 2 at the top. And you're going to need this part of the worksheet, the one with 9 boxes or 9 implications in it. And we're going to ask you on activity card 2 to take 5 minutes to do step 1. And step 1 is an individual exercise. You're going to look at the 9 implications and you can follow the instructions, pick the one that you think is most important or most relevant to you. Okay, that's step 1. I'm going to give you 5 minutes and then we'll go to step 2. Okay? By the way, there is no right or wrong answer on this part. There is no right or wrong answer. I told them. Yeah. Okay, we have a little less than 1 minute to pick your most relevant implication, and then we'll go to the next step. Okay, we're going to move to the second step, which is actually more fun. So now in step 2 on your activity card, when everyone at your table has chosen one implication, which you just did, discuss them as a group, then here's the goal in the next 10 minutes. Find the implication cards, pick your table's top 3 implications and place those cards on the map. Find the implication cards, pick your table's top 3 implications and place those cards on the map. And you have 10 minutes for that exercise.
All right, well, welcome back. We have one more exercise after this, but first I'm going to talk to you a little bit about some of the practices that we discovered for companies who are thinking about these very same issues. So, we are going to go to best practices. All right. Many of you have been part of social networks, whether it's in Korea, it's a Cyborg is the big social network. And some companies, we found one called Cerner, which is a company that is in the health insurance business, who brought their own network into their company. And this network does things like look for the latest materials that are posted to the learning management system. The network also allows you to follow your favorite people. If you can notice, there are sections of this. These little sections are all called widgets. And these widgets, the individual can select which widgets they will put in place on their homepage. One of the things that's going to happen is people are going to get the ability to be able to select what information they want coming to them. We're talking largely in this section about best practices that relate to learning, many of which use Web 2.0. Let me define some terms. Web 1.0, people were going and reading material on the network. Web 2.0, you get to read and contribute. So you get to read and write to the network, to the web. Web 3.0 will start to be, you have little robots that go out and look for material for you and allow you to search based on what your friends are also searching for and found useful. So those robots are called bots that will be coming back and saying, you know, if you liked this, you will probably also like this. So we're headed towards a way for people to be able to do not only 2.0 but 3.0. So you can follow your favorite people. So in here, this person has said, I want to see what so-and-so is reading and writing about. Someday you're going to be able to see, in my company you can already do this, you can see what is the CEO reading. That way you can read it too before you go to the next meeting with him. What are others working on? You can see some of their updates in this company. And you can subscribe to blogs or to fun things. So here we have a Dilbert cartoon, so people can even bring in their daily cartoons. So somebody is actually getting the chance to look at what they're doing. And you can follow topics of interest. So that's one example of how people are bringing in for learning the ability for people to have their own networks. At IBM and at Cerner, both of them have these. There are many companies that do, but at IBM and Cerner, the number one reason these kinds of social networks get used is to find experts. Experts are very difficult to find. So in IBM, it's called the Blue Pages. And you fill out a profile on what you're able to do, and it helps people be able to connect to finding the information fast. Knowledge is doubling every 2 years, and it takes 10 years to be an expert. So we all have a problem because we can never keep up with how fast knowledge is doubling. In fact, within 2 years, they think knowledge will double every year. And it won't be long after that before knowledge is doubling every 6 months. So those of you who are staying in the workforce until you're 80, you have to keep up because knowledge is doubling very, very, very quickly. Those of you who are 25 need to keep up because knowledge is doubling so quickly. Let me tell you about a practice that we have at Sun Learning Exchange that's won 5 awards. What we've created is a way for, think of this as YouTube. Are you familiar with YouTube? I found out how to say 감사합니다 on YouTube. So it's a very useful tool, has a lot of Korean content that's available on it. We created one for inside Sun so that we can have private channels and people can post content. So you can upload films or you can upload podcasts or presentations. And the content is developed by everybody in the company. Everybody in the company is contributing and adding content to the Sun Learning Exchange, the Social Learning Exchange. And you each have the ability then to determine who's going to see this content. So you can say, only people in my work group will see this content, or only people inside the company will see the content, or here's a channel that's on how do you repair hardware, and only people who go out and repair hardware will have access to this channel. So the interesting thing is that it also allows the learning function to find out what's popular with people, and then maybe we should develop courses on that. It includes the ability to rate content. All of the content that we create at Sun for learning allows people to rate and tag and comment. So when you think about this, this is much more of a social movement than it is a technology movement, because socially we have to decide, are we willing to accept comments from people lower in the organization or somebody who may disagree with something that we're doing. Again, this is a social movement more than it is a technology movement. So if you are concerned about the technology, that is the easy part. The hard part is how do we start to think as people about being able to open up to getting feedback from many, many, many places. A lot of times people ask on Sun Learning Exchange, well, how do you control content? How do you make sure that the content that gets posted, if everybody can contribute as a teacher, if we are all, namaste, the teacher in me honors the teacher in you, and we all are able to contribute content, how do you make sure that it's good content? How do you make sure that it's not somebody that's putting up pictures of their dog and talking about their dog? So one of the ways you do that is the same way you control email. So is it possible that people in your company are sending out pictures of their dogs or what they did on the weekend already? And are you controlling that? This issue about control was the same one that we faced, for those of us who can remember it, when we first started using email. Will people misuse email? So we just have to get over it. We just have to get over it because we had to get over it with email as well. It is now the way people are working. And in fact, people will do it whether we want them to or not. Whether we have a company policy about it or not, they will do it. So do people put up silly or just plain bad content? Do they do playful things? The thing about doing something inside a company is, unlike YouTube or unlike the social networks that you go to, they are not anonymous. They must log in with their employee ID. And so when they log in and they put something up with their employee ID, it is part of their personnel record now. So people are careful. And so they are very careful about what they put up because their career is being judged by how they are contributing to this, this collective knowledge. And besides that, the crowd governs it. So if you see bad content, you are now free to say, this is not accurate, this is not good content, and give it a low rating. And then when somebody goes to search for it, it doesn't come up high in the search, and people can read it and say, ooh, there's something wrong with this content. So you actually have a lot more information from a lot of people about whether the content is good or not. Well, does the content get dated? We have, when you think about it, when you do a search now, I did a presentation recently about how the different generation thinks about memes. Even in the United States, the word memes is an unusual word. So if you had to look up this word, what would be if you wanted to learn about memes, what is the first thing that you would do? You would probably open up a search engine. You wouldn't go to a class. We now have the ability to find a search engine. So one of the things that we did was make sure we had really good search on our SLX. We allow the learning function to have something called editor's choice, so that it will always, like ads, come up to the top of search. And if we find people who are developing really good content, we also allow them to become editor's choice people. And will there be a role left for learning functions? Yes, because now what we get to do is help people in many, many ways be able to learn about how to get their job done. So when we think about leaders, another best practice, and I'm putting another one in for Sun just to save handing over a microphone, but a really good example of this is also AT&T that we wrote about in our book. And when you think about it, Rick mentioned that leaders are going to become are going to be called on much earlier in their careers. There's not enough of the Generation X. So now millennials are going to have to move into leadership jobs much, much earlier than many of us had to move into leadership jobs. So how do you develop leaders rapidly? What is a good way to develop leaders very fast? That's going to be a dilemma for many of us as we move forward. One way to do that is like we train pilots. When we train pilots, we don't put them in a plane and have them fly and get some accidents under their belt. We put them in a simulator. So we put them in a flight simulator and let them practice crashing planes and figuring out how to get out of difficult situations. We can do the same thing in a management simulator. So a management simulator allows people to get some very broad management experiences very early in their career. And that is one of the things that we did with this simulation. We have a workshop that we use for our vice presidents and our directors. And we think of learning is not an event. Learning is a social process. So we don't have just one event. We make sure ahead of time they're getting feedback, they're filling out some information on themselves, and they get a phone executive coach. So they get a 1-hour session with an executive coach. Then real time in the workshop, they are getting the opportunity to run this management simulation where they pretend they are at a table like this. One of you is the CEO, one of you is the CFO, one of you is head of marketing, and so on. And you are going to run a company that looks just like Sun for 3 years. 1 day is a year. And we're going to see if you crash it or if you make it really successful. So you get the same kind of training as you get to do in a flight simulator, but by doing so by running the company. One of the challenges that we had at Sun is people grow up inside a company, inside a specific function. So they may grow up and only be in finance. I think one of the things Koreans do well is they move people around a little bit more than we do in the United States. I think that's a really good thing, especially early in a career. But one of the things that happens for us is that we didn't have people who'd had a chance to really experience running the whole company. And it really helps them understand strategy when you make a strategic shift in direction. And then afterwards, we also give them a way to flow down their learning and continue the learning. One of the things that someone said about, that someone from Accenture said, is I believe we have an obligation to bring along the next generations so that they're prepared for the jobs before they have to step into them. What it's about is, how do you make people capable of doing the job in a dramatically faster rate than simply allowing them to gain experience on the job? The key seems to be business simulations, and this was the CEO of Accenture. Also, when you get a chance to actually, as you can see, hopefully by actually talking with each other, so today you got a chance to kind of practice by doing at the table. We'll do some more, we'll do one more exercise, but you're going to remember this more than me standing up here and talking at you for 90 minutes. Because if I only talk to you, the average retention rate walking out is 5%. But because you've had to read some, you've had some audio-visual, you've had some demonstration, you've had practice by doing, and you've had discussion groups, you're going to remember more of this than others. So maybe if you think about what is it that in my company I want people to really absorb and remember, then you want to start using more advanced techniques for how we get there. And then finally, afterwards, we also, BTS developed this for us as well. We get a chance to cascade down to the rest of their organization. So not only do we say, we want you to learn this, but we want you to be a teacher. As a leader, we want you to be a teacher. So go back, and here's a kit to help you. So we had an online kit to allow the leader to become a teacher to their own group. And then I'm going to only mention this very briefly, but the number one choice for the people coming into the workforce for how they learn is mentoring. There are a lot of new and interesting ways that mentoring is developing. One is mass mentoring where you as a leader may coach 50 or 60 people at a time. Another one is reverse mentoring, where you may end up having a young person coach and mentor an older person to help them catch up with all the learning, all the new technologies, and to understand how this new millennial group thinks. And another one that that I'm showing you here is blind mentoring, where you pair two people who don't know each other and never meet each other and never find anything about each other, even their gender, so that they can communicate with each other. This particular tool is called EQ Mentor. And it has some really interesting emotional safety network because you are free, since they don't know who you are or what company you're from, you can very freely talk to them via a computer, so you're writing to each other on a computer, things that are happening in your company because they don't know your company name. So you can say, I have this dilemma, I have this problem with my boss, and no one ever knows except your mentor. So this is 6-month engagements that are done through this blind mentoring. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Rick to do a little feedback. Those are just a few best practices. Now let me turn it to Rick to talk a little bit about some of the workplace implications and what you said.
Thank you, Carrie. Very interesting results from the work at the table. Thank you for trusting us to have a conversation. So let me tell you about the top 3 results from the implications of the 9 boxes that you chose. 10 out of 11 tables chose answer number 5. The power of mobile computing will create new ideas in the workspace. I think everybody is thinking about what's happening in the workspace. Let me give you an example. When I was working with Hewlett-Packard, they did a survey to decide what was the utilization rate of the space within the company. And for 3 months, they went around and they made a check 3 times a day, every day, to decide if people were sitting in their chair or not. Thinking about how often do we use the space within an office because of this new virtual connected world. Their answer that they came up with was 29% of the space in the office was not being utilized. And so they made a shift to decide how to create a new kind of workplace that caters to a more virtual environment. They started installing cafes in the middle of the office space where people would come together and work and talk at the same time. As a result of this study, they saved $500 million on space. So there's 2 trends coming. Part of it is to be more efficient, but the other is the social aspect of how we are operating within the workplace going forward. Hewlett-Packard also believes that in the near future, within 5 years, 40% of its employees, and that's 300,000 people, 40% will be working from home. Big changes, and that's the number 1 item that you said was an implication. The second thing that everybody chose, 6 out of the 11 tables chose, the explosion of information will require us to help employees where to find and how to understand that information. So examples like the Cerner example that Carrie mentioned, or the internal social networking site, where you come to one place, you bring in knowledge, you bring in ideas, you interact with each other, and you let the computer do the work instead of it all in the brain. It's going to be very, very important. And I would ask you to ask yourself this question. In your company, in your university, in your organization, are people rewarded more by how much they know in their head or how they use the information? Most companies, if you look at the reward system, still reward by how much they know in their head. That has to change. The third item that you chose was number 3. the idea that young people and many companies are looking at social responsibility as a key factor for their company. So do you have a sociability plan? Do you have an employee brand? Do you have a brand around your social responsibility? Most new and modern companies are thinking very carefully about what they're doing, and it's not only just something they write down, but it's something that the employees believe in as well. So those are good examples. By the way, every single one except for number 2 received votes, which is very interesting because it's all about the fact that you think young leaders will be put into place soon. So it tells me, number 1, the room believes that they will become older and stay in the leadership jobs. But the fear is, what about when you have 50% of millennials in your company and you're trying to lead them with many generations in between? And one day, when you do get 85, 86 and you decide to retire, will you have the leadership ready? It's something to be a little concerned about. All right, so in the first exercise, we talked a little bit about the trends in knowledge and information. The second exercise, we said, how is that going to impact us in our companies? The third exercise we're now going to do is to talk about what would we do differently? What are some ideas on what we can go do differently? At Future Workplace, we work with companies on a daily basis thinking about how can you go make changes. So let me turn it over to Dan now, who will tell you what to do. And hang with us just for a few more minutes yet. This next part will be fun as well. Let's talk about what we're going to do differently. Dan?
So now it's your turn. We're going to share with you a set of actions that companies around the world are taking to deal with the implications that we discussed. So if you can look at the actions worksheet, it's on the back of your handout. It has 8 boxes. And look at activity card 3. And we're going to break this up into 2 steps again. And step 1 is going to be an individual exercise, and it's going to be 5 minutes. So read the directions on step 1, spend 5 minutes, do what it says, and then step 2, I'll remind you when we'll start step 2 in 5 minutes. Your answers under the columns on the map in the appropriate places. Some of you have started that already. So read step 2 and follow the directions. You have 10 more minutes.
Very last section now, which will be some predictions for the future. So you had a chance to list actions. What you'll get a chance to do is at the end of the session, if you want to walk around and see what other people voted on their tables, you can see what actions other people are doing, or you can stay around and chat with us after, if you don't have to get to a new meeting. So let's talk a little bit about some predictions about how all of these forces that we've talked about are going to be affecting the future. So let's again put on our hat for 10 years away and be thinking about how do we get to 10 years away? Because we've got globalization, demographics, and the social web all affecting this. And how does those affect how we attract, develop, and keep employees? Since this is a creative learning conference, we are only going to focus on develop for today's meeting. So one of the things that we know is that training companies must become experts training functions in companies must become experts in Web 2.0 technologies, such as social collaboration tools. When you ask people now, is Web 2.0 playing a major role in your learning function? 9% will say yes. In the future, in only 3 years, in a study of over 743 companies, 87% said this will become very important in the next 3 years. Is your company thinking about how are we going to be incorporating Web 2.0 technologies to help people learn? We believe that learning and knowledge management will begin to merge. Knowledge management was very popular about 10 years ago, but kind of faded away because I think it was a thought ahead of its time. We didn't have the good, sophisticated search that we have available now, and because people need to keep so much knowledge now, they cannot keep so much knowledge now in their head. They need to be able to access it and find it quickly. So one of the things that I think will happen is that learning and knowledge management are going to become almost one and the same thing. We think that learning organizations will have to adapt rapidly to the changing needs of business. So delivery methods are going to change. We think that that e-learning as we know it, where it's just between you and a computer, goes away, because what happens is people are much more, we are social beings. We want to learn socially. We want to learn from other people. I saw how much people were trading business cards at some tables. This table, I think every person got everybody's business card back at the table, because we hope to learn from one another. And so we need to create ways for us to learn one another online, not just learn from stagnant content on a computer. People need to learn something right when they need it, because it's so, because the business environment is so demanding. And many of the learning products that we create are almost extinct by the time we get them up and running, because our products and services are changing so quickly. Plus, you want to have information to how you learn personally, and not just how somebody that happens to have the same job title as you learns, because everybody's job is unique. So all of these different business demands are creating changes for learning. We also believe that companies are going to shift where they invest their money. Right now, you may have heard of this, that when you ask people, how do you learn on the job, 70% of how you learn on the job is how you learn what you need to do your job. You learn on the job from your peers, from others, from just doing. 20% you learn from your boss and from mentors. And about 10% you learn formally in classrooms. When you think about where we spend our money in companies, probably most of our companies are spending that money on the 10%. So maybe we spend 80 or 90% of our money on that 10%. And we believe in the future that people are going to start to move some of their investment into informal learning, so that we can create platforms like the social learning exchange that I told you about, so that people can learn from one another, so that peer-to-peer learning becomes more feasible. We think that all of the development requirements are going to change as we go away. As I said, e-learning is going to go away as we know it, because people are social, they're collaborative. There's going to be a lot more gaming. In our new hire experience at Sun, we use a video arcade game, and you compete against other people. And as you're playing this video game, you learn about Sun Microsystems. So there's going to be a lot more playfulness in gaming in order to engage this next generation of worker. Not many people were falling asleep during this session this morning. 90 minutes and not, people didn't fall asleep, even though you had to get up early and come here, because you're engaged, you're able to do it. There's going to be things where we are going to be able to actually wear a device on us that helps us learn. MIT has a device that they call a sixth sense device, so that even if I look at this gentleman right here, I could look on my hand and I'll have a Google search on my hand of who he is, because it recognized his picture and it will tell me things about him. This technology already exists. So it's just a matter of time before it's available for us to use. And I think changes are going to be really happening for learning and development and HR in terms of the new skills and the sample new job roles, some new job roles that will exist for learning and development. So we're going to have to morph away from always standing in front of a classroom, for example, to be able to enable people to learn from one another. We're going to have to get adept at using the tools people are using, and focus much more on how do we help people achieve their jobs, as opposed to how do I hold a training event. And that's going to mean new jobs. Our chief technologist at Sun is a deep technologist, not just an IT person, but somebody who could say, show me the code on a program in order to help integrate it across the programs. And we're all going to have to work with lots of different people. People that were formerly our competitors may become our co-opetition. We may be cooperating with our competitors on certain programs. Or sometimes they call them frenemies in the US. So we're going to have lots of different stakeholders to be working with. And we are all going to become digital citizens who are connected, and we will move up this ladder of participation. Some of us may be spectators, but we may move all the way up to being creators of content. All right, so you each had a chance to look at your activity cards there, and what we will do now is move to 1 or 2 moments of Q&A before we close. And one of the things I'd like to say, just in case I run out of time here, I'd like to thank my team from Sun Microsystems, the Chief Learning Officer for Korea, Ted Park, and Jen, could you please stand? And they helped do all the translations so that you had personal translations at your table in Korean. So thank you very much, Ted. All right, with that, I hope you had some fun this morning. I hope that you found this an engaging time. And I know some of you may need to get to other meetings, but if there are any questions, we're happy to take questions.
Okay. Is that Mike?
Thank you, Carrie. This was a lot of fun.
Thank you.
And I was wondering how you were going to fill up an hour and a half so early in the morning. And it went by really fast. My question has to do with transparency and trust. Because I agree with you. Actually, the issue is not how do we control for bad content. I think the bigger issue is how do we make sure that people are actually being honest and giving, honest feedback and pushing back on leadership so that we do get the best ideas and there is a robust conversation internally.
Right. So again, this is that's why it's a social movement, and it's more about the behaviors that you're going to have to change, the culture of an organization, than it is about technology. So just like if a CEO says, or a leader says, I have an open office, anybody can walk into my office and talk to me. If the first time somebody does that and the leader shoos them out and shuts the door, then our actions speak louder than our words, right? So the first time that that we start to get content, leaders need to say back, thank you for your feedback, I've noted it. So we do the same thing online in order to be, and the more that a leader welcomes this feedback, the more that a leader encourages comments for people to come from them, the more people will feel safe. Okay, they really mean it. They really do want this openness and transparency. And there are all kinds of business results, as anybody here could recognize. The earlier that we know that there are problems evolving in engineering, for example, the faster we're going to get to market with new products. If we allow everyone to be able to identify those kinds of needs by being open and transparent and accepting the feedback across lines of power, but you've hit on what's going to be one of the biggest challenges in, is do we want openness and transparency? And a company has to answer that question very honestly before they head down this path. Okay, I'll take one more question. Yes?
Yes. So only one more question. Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right.
이 통역이세요? 그렇지.
Oh, you're saying
아주 참 저는 뭐 한 80에 가까운 사람인데
You have to have a translation.
꼭 저 옛날에 군사 훈련을 가서
No, I need Hansu. I'm going to need you. I'm just going to rely on you physically. Is this one working? Okay, great.
나는 저 군인 출신이에요. 그래서 다른 사회보다도 일찍 미국에 가가지고 군사 훈련들 받고 그랬을 때 대학 강의보다도 실습도 많이 하고 뭐 앙케이트도 얘기하고 그래가지고 굉장히 놀란 경험이 되는데 지금 한 20, 30년 후에 이렇게 훌륭한 교육법을 가지고 이렇게 그냥 좀 통계를 내 가지고 이렇게 얘기하고 그것도 하나하나가 이 우리 G20에 이런 나라가 됐는데 와가지고 굉장히 렉처보다는 훌륭한 교육을 시키진 이 팀에 대해서 굉장히 존경해 갑니다. 여러분 박수로 환영해 주세요. 그래가지고 지금 경영학 우리 한국이 조찬 뭐 이렇게 모임에서 그 경영에 대해서 많이 배우는데 오늘 저 강의를 들으니까 아까 이런 실수해 보니까 굉장히 임프레시브하고 진짜 워카힐에 와가지고 막 여기서 아침을 먹었지만은 좋은 강의를 들었다 막 그런 생각을 하는데 지금 우리가 이 G20의 하나의 우리가 한국의 옛날에는 코리아 디스카운트로 해가지고 굉장히 우리를 발세했는데 이제는 코리아 프리미엄의 시대가 지금 왔지 않아요. 그래가지고 모든 경영학 교수들이 얘기하는 게 지금 뭐냐면 제너럴 엘렉트릭의 웰치의 사장이 제일이다. 그 사람은 사람을 무자비하게 카트하고 비용을 줄이고 해가지고 세계 1등이 됐다. 뭐 이래가지고 우리가 굉장히 그 지금 노사 문제니 뭐 이런 문제로 심각한데 지금 가만히 얘기하니까 그보다도 훌륭한 걸 얘기하셨다 이거예요. 근데 스탠포드에 있는 페이파 교수가 있는데 그 사람이 얘기가 쭉 그 기업을 조사해 봤더니 기업이 잘 되는 기업은 뭐냐면 하나 브루탈 어네스트가 있다 말이야. 그 문화적으로 브루탈 어네스트가 있어가지고 그런 기업이 잘 되더라 하는 걸 지금 얘기하고 웰치는 물론 매스컴에는 잘 나왔지만은 그거 너무 심플하다. 그런데 브루탈 어네스트가 있다. 그 브루탈 어네스트가 기업에서 어떤 것인가 그걸 한번 좀 설명해 줬으면 좋겠어요.
Kerry, we are running out of time.
All right,
so
brutal honesty.
very brief
Yeah.
explanation.
Yeah.
1 second
Yeah.
explanation. Would you?
Okay, so I think this concept from Jack Welch on brutal honesty is saying if you want to be competitive in the marketplace, you must create and foster an environment where people can be truthful with one another, even if sometimes it's the truth we do not want to hear. And so maybe Jack Welch and I would do it in different ways, but I think it's healthy for an organization, as I mentioned, to be able to have the ability to be open and transparent, as my colleague said over here, with one another. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to close. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Dr. Kerry Wilbert. Today we are scared. Actually, I am scared and also very thrilled to know that the new generation, millennials, are coming, and also social web is very important for future human resource development. And thank you for Dr. Kerry Wilbert and also Mr. Rick Von Feld, also Mr. Dan Perez for their excellent presentation. Thank you so much. And also your audiences for active participation. Thank you. Thank you so much. It's very exciting.
Was it? Okay, thank you.